It's been a jam-packed day in George Zimmerman's trial with key witnesses, including a chief medical examiner, a close friend of Zimmerman, and the lead detective in the case. The testimony focusing in on the central question: did Zimmerman murder Trayvon Martin, or did he shoot him in self-defense? Our analysts are standing by to talk about which side scored the most points with the 6 jurors, all of whom are women. Let's go to our correspondent who's been covering the trial. He was in the courtroom for much of the day. Martin Savage is joining us now from Sanford, Florida. What a dramatic day Day 7 has been, Martin.
Each day has brought its own uniqueness, and especially if you've been following this case closely, new insights. Today we had the medical examiner that testified. It should be pointed out that the medical examiner was actually giving her professional opinion on the injuries that George Zimmerman had suffered. Keep in mind, the prosecution for the past couple of days has been trying to use the words of George Zimmerman against him. Today, they apparently were trying to use the wounds of George Zimmerman, the injuries that Zimmerman maintains he suffered at the hands of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. And the prosecution was trying to make plain here that the medical examiner didn't think those wounds were severe or matched the account that George Zimmerman had given, especially about his head being slammed on the ground. Listen to this exchange.
Dr. Rao, using your definition of slamming, your common understanding of slamming, are the injuries to the back of the defendant's head consistent with having been repeatedly slammed into a concrete surface?
No.
Why not?
Because if you look at the injuries, they are so minor that, to me, the slam implies great force. And the resultant injuries are not great force.
What type and extent of injuries would you expect to see if the defendant's head had been repeatedly slammed into a concrete surface?
So if somebody's head is repeatedly slammed against concrete with great force, I would expect lacerations. I would expect a lot of injury that would bleed profusely, that would necessitate suturing, and so I don't see that in this picture.
George Zimmerman is maintaining, of course, that he had to shoot Trayvon Martin because he was fearing he was going to lose his life. He was so severely having his head beaten against the ground. Chris Serino, that's the lead investigator for the Sanford Police Department, was back on the stand again today. And the issue that came up was Trayvon Martin's arms. The reason it came up is that George Zimmerman says that after he shot Trayvon Martin, he then jumped on the team and pinned the team's arms down because he thought that that team could still be a threat. Here's some of how the discussion went in court, the testimony.
You recall also on cross-examination, defense counsel asking you about inconsistencies or consistencies, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall the defendant in the interview that he gave you and Investigator Singleton stating that after he had shot Trayvon Martin said, "oh," or something, put his hands up, correct? Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall that he then stated that Trayvon Martin somehow fell on the ground face first? You recall that?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall the defendant stating that he put his arms out, correct? Do you recall him saying that?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall, sir, that one of the first, in fact, the first person that actually came out before the officer was a person named Manalo, Joe Manalo?
Yes, sir. Jonathan.
I'm sorry. Jonathan Manalo. I apologize. And may I approach the witness, Your Honor? Showing you State's Exhibit 77. Do you recall that he took some photographs out there?
Yes, I remember those, yes.
And one of them was State's Exhibit 77?
Yes, sir.
And may I publish that to the jury, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
And you recall in that photograph the victim's hands being underneath his body?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Could someone say that that was inconsistent with the defendant's statements that his hands were straight out, that he had put his hands out?
That positioning, yes.
I'm sorry.
That positioning, as seen there, yes, it is.
An attempt to show another inconsistency with Zimmerman, saying that he had the arms outstretched, but yet authorities say the arms of Trayvon Martin were folded under his body. Both.
Dramatic testimony indeed. Martin, don't go too far away. I want to bring in our legal analyst, the former federal prosecutor, Sonny Hostin, the criminal defense attorney, Mark Nejame. They're both in Sanford, Florida. Also our senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Sonny, I want you to weigh in on what we just heard. What did you think of Day 7 and this dramatic testimony?
You know, in my view, Wolf, Day 7 was a win for the prosecution. I mean, they came out of the box swinging, certainly by getting Serino's statements that he felt that George Zimmerman was truthful, getting that stricken from the record, getting an instruction to the jury that they were to disregard it. And then they just went on and on and on, getting Serino to concede so many of the prosecution's points. One, they said, you know what, if you profile someone as a criminal, that's profiling, isn't it? He conceded that point, Wolf. He also conceded that he believed that George Zimmerman was following Trayvon Martin. He then conceded that that behavior could be considered ill will, hate, spite, which is one of the elements that the prosecution has to prove. Then he also, you know, got him on, the prosecution also sort of delved into the fact that George Zimmerman said he had to get out of the car to find an address that was right in front of his very eyes. And then finally, the piece that you just showed that he, you know, went over this this testimony or statement rather by George Zimmerman that Trayvon Martin's arms were out when in fact found with arms underneath. I mean, it was win after win after win after win, concession after concession after concession. I thought that the redirect of this witness was masterful, and I don't even know that the jury's going to remember anything that happened yesterday.
I know, Mark, you totally disagree with Sonny, but tell us why.
Totally is all-encompassing, but almost totally. Look, I think that the state has some good points, and I think the defense did as well, but it could have been malice. It could have been evil intent. Could have, would have, should have don't get you a conviction. You have to prove it through evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. And if we're at the level where the best we could get from a state with their primary witness, their lead investigator, is it could have happened, where's the evidence? Where's the proof that's going to sustain a conviction? No, I think that they had a few points, and Sonny appropriately pointed out some of the good ones. But, and I spoke in the last segment about his arms being stretched out with one version and being underneath on another, and I do think that's a challenge for the defense, because there is an inconsistency there that we've not heard from the defense how they're anticipating dealing with that. But without all else said, we saw a man who was quiet. We saw a man who came and presented himself well, that he ended up having a nice friend, his best friend, who is a former sheriff's deputy and working with as a federal marshal, air marshal. You know, he came across as a decent guy, and you didn't have this rage that, you know, here was this man with evil intent and evil motive. You know, you ended up hearing his stories. They were relatively consistent. I don't think you could have anybody talk about any topic 5 times and have them match up every time on everything. But by and large, he gave a consistent story, and I just don't see where the state has given enough evidence to meet their burden of beyond a reasonable doubt. I just don't see it.
Jeffrey, when Sonny was making her points, win after win after win for the prosecution today, I think I saw you raise your eyebrows there in sort of disbelief. But what do you think?
I mean, I think that Sonny is correct that there were certain points that were made, but you know, the overall impression I had anyway was you had Sean Hannity doing a very sympathetic interview where Zimmerman got to lay out his case in an undisturbed way. He had his best friend lay out his case again, where he said in a very sympathetic way that, you know, George Zimmerman did not mean to kill Trayvon Martin, and then you had an expert witness who said, yeah, maybe he punched him once, maybe he punched him a couple of times. I mean, where it's just, I don't see where the guilt is here. I don't see where evidence of a murder is being presented in here. Now, it is true that if the jury wants to pick through the evidence and find incriminating items, as Sonny said, they are there. But the overall impression I got, and again, perhaps I'm wrong, was that this case is just not going in very well for the prosecution.
Right, very quickly, Sonny, button it up.
Well, I completely disagree with Jeff, and Jeff knows that I value his opinion, and he's a friend. But the bottom line is, this is the second week of this case. I think today was a sea change for the prosecution, and these cases are like puzzles, Wolf. You're putting a puzzle together without the benefit of the box that has the picture on it. At the end of the case, generally, all the puzzle pieces are together, and you see the picture. for me, I'm seeing that picture. There are a couple little pieces missing, but not much. I think in closing arguments, the prosecution is going to wrap this up. They're going to overlay all of these different inconsistencies in George Zimmerman's statements. And I've got to tell you, I do see that the prosecution is going to be able to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt.
A lot of people already suggesting maybe they would have been better off with a manslaughter case as opposed to second-degree murder. But you know what? We'll continue this conversation down the road. Guys, thanks very much.